3 videos in 1 month? It's more likely than you might think. Kia ora koutou. My name is Stephanie. This is Boots Theory. Welcome back from our holiday to Craftville. Hope you had a great time. Let's dive into some pure geek theory. Star Wars Andor is fantastic. That's not a groundbreaking statement. But maybe it should be. It's a prequel to the MacGuffin that launched the entire franchise, and when you put it like that, it has absolutely no right to be one of the best things Star Wars has ever done, and possibly the best thing Star Wars has done since it got bought by the mouse. I'm not here for the Grogu hate, though. I would die for Grogu, and the fact that we'll never see Mando and Cass in the same scene together because of timelines makes me a little sad. A lot has been said and written about Season 1 of Andor, and I'll put some of my favourites in the description below. But the piece of media, if you can call a series of episodes that lasts almost 3 times as long as the actual show it's reviewing a piece, that I come back to whenever I want a comfort listen and some staunch political motivation, is the podcast A More Civilized Age, who took a break from their usual Rebels and Clone Wars content on a whim and fell head over heels for Andor. The love, the joy, the in-jokes, the analysis, these are all amazing, and having first listened to it after I'd seen the whole season myself, so I knew what was coming and could be even more excited when they'd predict or hope for certain things to happen, was very satisfying. The bit where Austin just completely loses his shit over a thematic call Rob made in the previous episode, that's what I listen to when I need my spirit boosted. But there's a few points where we disagree. Nothing substantive, nothing deal-breaking, just a few differences of take and perspective like you're always going to have when you love and overthink an incredibly dense piece of media. Kino new. And one of them is about Maarva. Specifically, whether she dies a silly old woman dreaming of rebellion who with her last figurative breath calls for revolution, or something else. And because I need to rationalise why I am right and this amazing podcast I love is wrong, which is basically the essence of being a Star Wars fan, I took the seed of this idea and grew a whole theory. A Fandor theory. I'm so sorry. Let's get clear on the ground rules. This video is not a lot of things. It's not a revelation of some secret hidden truth I've pieced together. Season 1 is perfectly coherent with or without my take added to it. It's not an attempt to persuade or dictate. I do not mind if you love this theory and want to immediately add it to your personal headcanon, or if you prefer the version of the story which already existed in your head which doesn't account for these ideas and suggestions. It's not based on any clues or suggestions of what's coming in Season 2. I've even denied myself the joy of the Season 2 trailer while writing this script in case there's some hint or revelation that would affect my thinking. Because one thing this video is hedging my bets a little. If it turns out that I called any of this correctly, I want bragging rights. I'm not going to make you wait all the way till the end of the video, though if you do stick around it'll make line on graph go up, and I am a child of the 80s, so that will directly increase my serotonin. But before we get to the theory, we do need to cover. Because like all good theories, it starts with questions. Why is Maarva convinced the rebellion is coming to Ferrix? Who told Luthen about Cassian? Who is Maarva, outside of what we see in Season 1? Are these 3 things connected? Here it is. Maarva knew Luthen. She may have known Luthen for decades. She has been aware or active in political resistance since before she adopted Cassian. She stepped away from that resistance because of Cassian, or maybe the death of his father Clem, but stayed in touch with Luthen and told him about her boy. Told him details it seems no one else has access to, and gave him the faith in Cass to put the entire launch pad of his rebellion on the line to bring him in. I am extremely excited about this theory, but I promise, if Season 2 comes out next week and completely blows this out of the water, I will bow to Tony Gilroy's far superior wisdom. I'm not going to recap everything that happens in every episode because there is not enough time to do it justice, and I don't want to lose focus too much. Sticking to the relevant points. Cassian kills 2 cops on Morlana 1 and realizes he needs to skip town, so he goes to his friend Bix, who helps him fence stolen Imperial tech, and says, "Your friend, the one who buys, your secret friend, how fast can you reach him? How soon could he be here?" And twice, You said he wanted to meet me. So we know Luthen, Bix's buyer, has expressed a desire to meet Cassian. And that's all we get out of episode 1. There's still very little to say this early in the season. Bix tells Cass the buyer's coming when he tries to back out of the deal. This episode is where the theory really gets its legs, starts running full speed and goes straight through the stable wall. When Luthen arrives, he meets up with and is briefed by Bix. He's seen the police bulletin seeking a Canary male. He knows it's referring to Andor despite it not naming him yet. He says his Imperial prison record says he's from Fest. He asks Bix if she trusts Andor. Luthen knows enough about Andor to have searched for his prison record and recognize him by description as a Canary male. There are alternative explanations, like Luthen can put 2 and 2 together when his fence calls out of the blue and a guy who's refused to meet him is suddenly available, and there's someone in the sector wanted for killing 2 cops. He would have Cass's full name from Bix, and it's ambiguous if he already knew Cass is from Canary. How much information is Bix really sharing when she briefs Luthen about her sources? But we definitely get the sense Luthen likes to know more than the person he's talking to, or at least appear to. Then we get some Maarva and Clem lore. In a flashback to Cassian's childhood on Canary, the Andors enter the crashed Republic ship, referring to something burning off, possibly the poison gas or whatever has rendered the planet inhospitable, which isn't fully explained. And with Clem warning Maarva, you might not want to be here when they come to clean up. He tells her 20 minutes, tops. B2 tells them, Republic frigate approaching. This is a bit more of a questions raised rather than answers given segment. Canary was an abandoned, toxic mid-rim planet. So, why is that Republic ship there? Why does it crash? How do Clem and Maarva get to it so quickly, with pretty detailed knowledge of what's scavengeable on board and on what's happened outside with Cassian's tribe? And how does the second Republic ship get there so quickly? I don't have answers to any of those questions, but they pretty clearly indicate to me that there is more to Clem and Maarva than just a pair of happy-go-lucky scavengers stumbling upon a feral abandoned boy. One tiny side note, if you're a fan of B2 emo, because you're not a monster, and you love the way they are depicted as a sad old dog in the present-day scenes, I have to point out that in the flashbacks, they don't have a little yellow wheel support. They are a sad old dog with a prosthetic limb. This is reinforced by the conversation Clem and Maarva have after finding young Cassa tearing the ship apart with his bare hands. Maarva says, they'll kill him. Clem, they'll kill us. Clem tells her Cass has people here. She says, it'll be open season here the moment that frigate lands. I'm not leaving him here to die. They know what's gone down between Cass's tribe and the surviving Republic officer, and they are convinced that mass murder is going to happen when the Republic arrives. Maarva is politically aware, doesn't trust the authorities, and feels an obligation to save Cass's life. Back in the present day, Cass meets Luthen. A lot of their conversation involves Luthen testing Cass, his methods, his approach, his ideology, or lack of it. Luthen brings up that the Starpath unit Andor is selling was stolen from Steerguard. We haven't even heard about Steerguard at this point, and we'll find out in the next episode that the base at Steerguard initially tried to hide the theft to avoid scrutiny. Dedra knows all about it, because Steerguard is in her jurisdiction, but it's unclear how widely this theft has been reported. It's possible Bix knows, but she only just found out that Cass has the Starpath unit, and is she really going to transmit that over a coded radio signal? But that's not the interesting bit. Cass says, I don't know you. Luthen replies, fair enough, but I know you, and he goes on to prove it. When Cass brings up not wanting to get caught with the Starpath unit, Luthen says, they'd hang me, wouldn't they? Take me up Rick's Road and hang me in the square. And just to drive the point home, wouldn't be the first time, would it? Isn't that where they hung your father? Again, this could come from Bix, sure, but is Bix going into this level of detail with her buyer about her dashing, probable ex-boyfriend and business partner? Luthen says, I said I know you. I know all about you. Yes, I want the box, and I'll leave with that if it's all I can get. I came looking for something more, and I think I've found it. When Cass demands to know how Luthen knows about him, he dodges the question. If he's just getting all this from Bix, why would he do that? And wouldn't Cass know that Bix knows this stuff, and is there one person in common? So Luthen knows details of Cass's life, and doesn't have an easy answer for how. Then he pivots to persuasion, offering Cassian the opportunity to really hit the Empire where it hurts. He asks, "Don't you want to fight these bastards for real?" And this is really intriguing to me, because if you look at everyone close to Cassian in his life, none of them would tell you that Cass wants to rebel, that he has a political bone in his body, that he even cares enough to be angry and determined to oppose the fascist regime he lives under. We know from Maarva's final words to Cassian that she believed he had the good fight in him, but that wasn't her day-to-day experience of him. Is Luthen making a calculated guess? Is he just really, really, really good at reading people? It could be, but Luthen doesn't take a lot of chances over the course of Season 1, and almost all the chances he does take are around someone with the surname Andor. And just finally, as the episode closes out into a fantastic chase sequence, in case you thought that maybe Luthen just has a lot of sources on Ferrix and that's how he's calculating all this, when the cops arrive and the bells start ringing, he doesn't know what the sound is. Luthen is not of Ferrix. He's getting his intel from someone there. We get a little more interaction between Luthen and Cass on the way to Aldhani. Cass has decided Luthen is some flavour of rebel and demonstrates that he does have an awareness of some of the groups that are fighting the Empire, but doesn't think much of any of them. He also flexes his military and prison record, only to be cut down by Luthen, who reveals he knows the real story. You lived because you ran. Luthen has previously stated to Bix that he's seen Cass's Imperial prison record. Would that include his military service? Is he just being really insightful again? Was the conflict Cass was involved in infamous in some way? Or, again, has he talked to someone with knowledge of it? This isn't the story Andor tells anyone. It's not going to be the story Bix would know or would share. I love how Luthen puts it to Cass. I said I know you. I know the outside. I know what people tell me when I ask. The rest I imagine. Who is he asking? To the best of Cassian's knowledge, Luthen is Bix's buyer. Maybe at a stretch he knows that Park, whose store is the site of Bix's secret radio, might be involved a bit. But who is Luthen asking? And why is he asking them? The most important thing we see in this episode is not their conversation, but the level of risk Luthen goes to in order to bring Cass in. He gives him his name, he shows him his ship, he shares his depth of knowledge and ideology and plan, and of course his incredibly valuable kyber crystal. Given what is at stake, and how incredibly careful we see him and also Kleya being, even when it comes to contacting people like Vel, who can easily pass as a shop client on Coruscant, he is 100% not just relying on intel from Bix and hacking into a prison record. And he is very clear that recruiting Cassian was not a spur-of-the-moment thing. I didn't risk my ass for the Starpath unit. I came for you. And given that apparently the Aldhani heist can't happen without him, I mean, we could even wonder if Luthen was already on his way to Ferrix when Bix called him. Or he's incredibly good at bluffing on a completely empty hand. And I would buy that. Now, a few bits of information I don't actually take into consideration are what Luthen tells Vel when he's forcing her to take Cass onto the team. It feels pretty clear that he wants Cassian on the job, and he will say whatever he needs to get Vel to accept it. It is true that the plan isn't 100% figured out, and Cassian is absolutely vital to the success of the mission, but all that could be true, and Luthen could just be making up what languages Cass speaks. Luthen admits to Kleya that Andor might know too much. The thief, Andor. I wasn't careful. She replies, "You wanted this to happen." Aldhani or Cass? First off, I love how this description makes it sound like Luthen was assembling his dream Dungeons & Dragons party, though it begs the question, if Cassian is the thief, what's everyone else's class? We know that Cassian is more than a thief, and Luthen seems to understand that. That's the basis on which he's pitching Cassian to Vel. Is this another case of Luthen keeping things close to his chest, and not even telling Kleya how important he thinks Cass is? Why would he do that? Episode 6 contains no useful information for the purposes of this theory, but it does contain the single best set piece ever portrayed in the Star Wars universe, so even if you don't give a single fig about my theory or the show's politics, you need to watch it. Not related, but since this one opens with Cyril and his wonderfully awful mother, a whole other question I have is, why is Cyril so quickly and firmly convinced that Cassian is involved with the Aldhani heist? Put your suggestions in the comments. Also not related, but I would love this to come up in Season 2, Mon Mothma visits Luthen and Kleya listens in from the back room. I mean, isn't Luthen just going to tell her what Mon said? Is she really Luthen's second-in-command and trusted assistant? Or is there a different power dynamic at play? We also get to see Kleya's amazing Red Riding Hood assassin outfit as she goes to meet Vel and sets her to find and kill Cassian for knowing too much. But here's the good bit of the episode, for theory purposes anyway. Cassian returns home to find Maarva is fired up about the Aldhani job. The Imperials are here to stay. They're not going away this time. This is foreshadowing the epic speech, which I think is a good bit of proof that she's not just finding her politics on her deathbed. Cass then goes to Bix for information about Luthen. I need to know about the other guy, the buyer. Who is he? I don't know. You're lying. I'm not. Park introduced us, but swears he doesn't know either. I have a comm. I call. I wait. Sometimes they respond. Sometimes they respond. He knew all about me. How? I don't know. And you're right, he did know. He knew that the corpos were on you, but not from me. This makes it pretty clear that Bix hasn't been gossiping to Luthen about all the details of Cass's life, his military service, his father's murder. Cass returns to Maarva and tries to get her to leave Ferrix with him, to go to a place the Empire hasn't ruined, and she says, I'm already there. That place is in my head. They can build as many barracks as they like. They'll never find me. Who else do we know who's compartmentalized their entire identity to protect themselves from the Empire discovering their true ideals? Cass asks, what's left to keep you here? The rebellion. Ferrix has been hiding long enough. It's overdue and probably doomed, and I'm too old and I don't care anymore. And then she reflects on how Clem was murdered by the Empire and connects it to Aldhani. If there are heroes brave enough to take on a whole Imperial garrison, I'm brave enough to stick it out here. There's work that will need doing. Maarva is thinking about the rebellion in joined-up coordinated terms, something only Luthen and Kleya and Dedra Meero appear to be doing right now. Maarva is acknowledging she could have taken action earlier, and didn't. As Cass goes, she urges him not to keep looking for his sister. There were no survivors on Kenari. What happened there was not your fault. You were a child. So, whose fault was it, Maarva? Who wasn't a child when the Republic, presumably, murdered all of Cass's family? Cass leaves, and Maarva picks up her gun. Maarva is acting like she expects the cops to kick in her door any day. Finally, we see another meeting of the ISB, and it strikes me how many times the show demonstrates that it is very difficult, even for the heads of intelligence of the Empire, to collate and analyze data. They don't have good search engines or combined databases. So when someone like Luthen seems to know everything about a person, his sources must be very good. The episode where Cass goes to the very, very awful prison. Not that any prisons aren't awful, but this one is pretty awful. Dedra briefs Yularen on the Ferrix situation and refers to Cassian as a local thief, showing us again that even the ISB don't have the level of intel on Cass that Luthen seems to have access to. On Ferrix, Brasso and Bix are taking care of Maarva, who has injured herself trying to access old tunnels under the hotel which is being used as the Imperial base. Bix explains, so the rebellion can sneak in and take them by surprise. They clearly think she's delusional or senile, but this is exactly how Cassian will rescue Bix, and the question is there to be asked. Who does Maarva think she'll tell? Kleya insists on shutting down the Ferrix connection, demanding that Luthen tell her to do it. Again, there's an interesting power dynamic there. She also repeats that Luthen took risks with Cass because he was desperate for Aldhani to work. But given Luthen placed Cass in the team mere days before the operation, that was cutting it pretty fine. And how lucky was it that this all coincided with Cassian killing 2 cops on another planet and needing an escape? I don't think that either helps or hinders the theory, but it is a loose thread that I would like to see wrapped up in Season 2. Possibly a marker against the theory, we learn as Dedra interrogates Bix that Clea, we presume, recruited Park first for the acquiring Imperial equipment side of things. And maybe that's it. The rest of this story is a coincidence flowing from Park bringing in Bix and Bix bringing in Cass. It certainly makes sense that Ferrix is where you'd set up that part of the operation. But we also find that Axis, or rather Luthen, only met Park once, so he's clearly not the source of any information about Cassian. Alongside Episode 6, Episode 10 is also the single greatest set piece ever produced in the Star Wars universe, and you simply must watch it. Nothing for the theory here, but it's an absolute banger. The opening scene of this episode with Brasso consoling B2 and Jezzy understanding that B needs to feel helpful is so beautiful and heartbreaking. Clea gets a fire speech off on Vel, Luthen goes full James Bond including car with gadgets, Cass calls home, and someone is cutting a lot of onions in my house right now. It's the final countdown of Season 1 and everyone gets amazing moments to shine. Obviously, Maarva's speech is the high point of a very high series, but first we find Luthen has decided to come to Ferrix himself, despite the risks, which he's repeatedly said, and been told, are extremely high. He knows Vel and Cinta are there, along with a massive Imperial presence. So is he just making sure they get Cass? Or is he trying to save Cass? Or does he owe an old friend a proper farewell? When he meets Vel, he does clearly endorse the plan to kill Andor, and pulls Cinta off Maarva's house to get to the hotel instead. How he intends the rest of this to play out, we never know, because nothing goes according to anyone's plan. Because the speech. It's beautiful and staggering and awesome, and I think it offers a lot of insight into Maarva's background, which isn't completely obviously spelled out. I was always eager, always waiting to be inspired. We've been sleeping. They left us alone. I've been turning away from the truth I wanted not to face. Describing the Empire as a wound and a darkness. We let it grow, and now it's here. It's not visiting anymore. If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire. And at long last, as the dust settles on what will almost certainly be remembered as the Rix Road Massacre, Cassian faces Luthen aboard the Fondor and says, "You came here to kill me, didn't you?" And Luthen says, "You don't make it easy." So where does this all bring us? To the tale of Maarva Carassi Andor, scavenger, mother, rebel. Maarva Carassi is an idealistic young woman born and raised on Ferrix who meets and marries Clem Andor and together with him works as a scavenger and salvager, someone who knows how to get her hands on strategic technology and equipment, a skill set which perhaps takes her off Ferrix to meet and befriend Luthen Rael, someone else with a very strong interest and a political strategy built around acquiring stolen government technology. He's got strong feelings about the Republic in its moribund dying days, sees the fascist regime coming, and is full of bluster about what he'd do about it. Maarva is more skeptical. She doesn't think people will take on the powers that be, and without the people, you won't succeed. Something goes down in the skies above Canary, and Clem and Maarva are on scene very quickly with detailed information about what to extract from the crashed Republic ship. They also know the Republic will be ruthless to them, and to Cassian's tribe, who Clem and Maarva know have killed a Republic officer. Maarva feels responsible for saving Cassian, and carries the guilt for the rest of her life for the part she's played, in either leaving the rest of Cass's tribe to die, or maybe in bringing the Republic down on them in the first place. Becoming a mother and knowing she needs to hide Cass, telling everyone he's from Fest for example, may form the first wedge between her and Luthen, but if not, the murder of Clem at the hands of the Empire seals the deal. She's never fully believed in Luthen's radical theories, and now all she has left is her child, who she feels a huge obligation to protect, given how she came to be his mother. She goes back to sleep. The Empire leaves Ferrix alone for the time being, and she just has to hope Cass will survive his first term in prison, and she builds a place inside her head that the Empire can never find, and locks the door. But she keeps in touch with Luthen. He's got some familiarity with Ferrix, he visits a few times, maybe he pops in on an old friend, and they catch up, drink too much revnog, and end up having the same old arguments about accelerationism and praxis into the early hours of the morning. This is how Luthen knows so much about Cassian, or at least knows where to look to get information on Cassian, and he knows the people who raised Cassian. What's interesting is that while he knows about Clem's murder, and he knows the truth about Cassian's military service, he never mentions Cassian's sister. Which is weird, because that's probably the single most compelling thing he could use to get Cass on side. Join me, and we'll use my intergalactic spy network to find your lost family. But it makes sense if we remember that Maarva feels incredibly guilty and responsible for what happened on Kenari. She might have told Luthen the tale of Cassian's adoption, maybe glossing over the bit where it was basically an abduction, but that's an even darker part of the story. It would be understandable that she leaves it out, that she never speaks of it. At the same time, Luthen understands or guesses that Cassian has this incredibly powerful need to hurt the Empire. And that's not how anyone, even Maarva, would describe him at this point in time. But if Luthen knew Clem and Maarva, he might be able to predict what kind of a man would be the product of their parenting. So when his network conveniently, albeit understandably, gets set up on Ferrix, and it turns out one Cassian Andor is supplying Bix, he sees an opportunity to recruit a valuable asset. But he does have to make it look natural, so he doesn't push Bix too hard on the point. Speaking of which, we also see him not sharing full information with Clea about why he wants to recruit Cassian so badly, or why he's willing to take such risks. We know Clea is even more ruthless than Luthen, and very willing to call him out when he's being sentimental or foolish. She would clearly see this move, recruiting the son of an old friend who used to run illegal tech with him, as an unacceptable risk to the mission. So Clea just has to know Cassian as a thief. But eventually, Luthen just needs someone, now, with Cass's cross-class skill set to make the Aldhani job work. And maybe he's been waiting for months for the right moment to make the approach, and time is running out, and it's just luck, because the series never talks about the Force, that Cassian needs an out at the exact right moment. That ongoing connection between Luthen and Maarva would also explain why, at a time when almost everyone else perceives the forces opposing the Empire as a ragtag bunch of squabbling factions, Maarva is starting to think about the rebellion. Maybe 20 years ago, she and Clem and Luthen sat around a table late at night, drinking revnog and shooting the shit about how the real problem with the left is all the factionalism, and now she sees the hope for a unified opposition capable of taking on the Empire. A rebellion that she knows is coming to Ferrix, because he always pops in for a chat when he's in town. And that's why she's got her gun ready when Cassian comes to try to take her away. Because if the Empire gets Luthen, if they're looking into the kinds of people who might be supplying a growing rebellion with stolen technology, they might come looking for people like her. People who maybe did stuff like take down and strip Republican frigates on abandoned toxic mid-rim planets back in the day. People who are ready and waiting to tell the rebellion how to access the old tunnels under the hotel. Maarva Andor isn't someone who was unpolitical and focused on her own life and now on her deathbed realizes the truth. She wanted to be inspired. She chose to turn away. Because she had a son to protect and too much grief to stay in a hopeless fight. Aldhani showed her that other people were out there, willing to take on the Empire and win, and maybe her old friend Luthen had a point. As she dies, she knows it isn't enough for her to wake up. She needs Ferrix to wake up. Because even though it might cost everything, even though it's easy for the dead to tell you to fight, it's better to die fighting them than to die giving them what they want. And Luthen once again takes a huge and unnecessary risk for the sake of a member of the Andor family. He comes to Ferrix to attend Maarva's funeral and hear her final words because he owes her that much, and take one last shot at recruiting her son, and see for himself that on some level she was right about how you start a revolution. On A More Civilized Age, when they're discussing Maarva's speech, there's the idea that Luthen is shaken by what happens because it's the kind of action he can't orchestrate, the natural explosion of a community which has been simmering with anti-authoritarian sentiment, building over multiple smaller outrages and assaults, and suddenly has an organic outlet for its rage. How much more powerful a revelation would that be for Luthen to see it come from the dying words of a woman he knew, who maybe he had these political arguments with decades ago, him asserting the necessity of a puppet master creating the opportunities for resistance, versus her belief that ordinary people needed to stand together out of real material experience and community solidarity.
Maybe they were both right, from a certain point of view.
Maarva knew Luthen. She may have known Luthen for decades. She has been aware or active in political resistance since before she adopted Cassian. She stepped away from that resistance because of Cassian, or maybe the death of his father Clem, but stayed in touch with Luthen and told him about her boy. Told him details it seems no one else has access to, and gave him the faith in Cass to put the entire launch pad of his rebellion on the line to bring him in.
Thank you so much for staying to the end where I get a bit philosophical and rambly. I said at the top that I am not presenting this as the truth, the hidden canon of Season 1 of Andor. I think there's a lot of loose threads and unanswered questions from Season 1 that I hope will be wrapped up in Season 2, even if it's not quite the way I would write it. Even if it doesn't leave the door open for a prequel series about young Maarva and Luthen fighting crime. Kathleen Kennedy, call me.
Something that a big chunk of geek culture has lost is the ability to really wonder and imagine. You see it in the obsession with codifying the Force, people complaining that Rey isn't a high enough level to lift rocks with space magic, or declaring the Fallout series isn't canon because a chalkboard is ambiguous about the date Shady Sands was destroyed. Even the way proponents of AI slop art are only capable of producing worse versions of their favourite exalted sourcebook art from their teenage years, before they realised capitalism was fucking them too. Sure, it might be annoying when a creator completely retcons previous work because they changed their mind or got bored with an idea. I have an entire rant which could be a video in of itself about how this is what really ruined Dexter for me, even before the series finale, and I pretty much gave up on Marvel after Infinity War annihilated the hopeful ending of Thor Ragnarok. But that's the thing, we live in a golden age of content. If a show or character or premise isn't working for you, you can find something else to watch or read or fanboy over. Playing in these worlds we all love and thinking, what if, and pushing the boundaries can be a huge source of joy if you let it, and a great way to build community and friendships even with people you completely disagree with. I have one friend who has almost opposite opinions about Jane Austen to me, but we do both love Jane Austen, and part of the fun in our conversations is going back and forth and indulging each other or winding each other up, which is to say, Daniel, if you're listening, Emma Woodhouse is a spoilt brat and her dad is insufferable, unless he's being played by Bill Nighy. And people have always seen and been drawn to different things in media, whether it's favouring different characters or finding different interpretations of motivations and events, or having different plot points or lines of dialogue or scenes resonate differently with us, because we are all different. In my Babylon 5 video, I linked to Council of Geeks video outlining their theory that Franklin in Babylon 5 is trans. And that's not something that ever occurred to me, and I don't think it really fits within my own interpretation of Franklin and his walkabout. My take is probably way more cynical, but it's something that I will always think about now when I rewatch Babylon 5, in a good way. Poltergeist has an incredible 2-hour video on the ending of The Thing, which presents all the different scenarios that people argue about, and part of his conclusion is, we don't know, and even if we knew what John Carpenter intended when he made the movie, that wouldn't necessarily have to change how you feel about it as a viewer of the movie.
Obviously, I am team neither of them are the thing, because I think that aligns better with the movie's themes of paranoia and mistrust leading to destruction, and also I refuse to believe Kurt Russell or Keith David would get got that way.
Fundamentally, I think my point is this. When it comes to your personal enjoyment of the things you like, other people's opinions and theories can add to your experience, or you can disregard them. The obvious carve-out is when it's not just about your personal enjoyment, like when angry internet men are trying to get Star Trek Discovery cancelled because they hate queer people and women of colour. It is completely valid to mock them when they say Star Trek has never been political, because, come on, man.
The way you engage with the things you like is your business. The stories you tell about the stories you enjoy is a part of the process of enjoying them. We aren't here to sit citizenship exams for our fandoms, and it doesn't have to be canon to be true.